Dann willkommen zur...
Okay, so welcome to our third session. So we are talking about monitoring and quality control at national level. And we are starting with Kathryn Roberts. She is an architect who studied at Cambridge and Cardiff. And she is a specialist in the historic environment. She is overseeing protection of historic buildings, monuments, parks, gardens, and landscapes in Wales. She's a member of the team that developed the nomination of the slate landscape of North West Wales. Kathryn, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm sorry I can't be with you, but I've had a really fascinating time enjoying this meeting so far, and I'm really looking forward to contributing further. As it says on my slide, I'm going to talk about how we manage World Heritage Sites, and in particular how we manage change, which I think fits in very much with what the speakers have been talking about in our World Heritage Sites in Wales. For those of you who aren't familiar with Wales, has the picture changed? I hope the picture has changed. Oh, sorry, I keep asking you. I can't see.
Yes, it has changed.
Thank you so much. For those of you who are not familiar with Wales, we are one of the 4 countries that comprises the United Kingdom. I've marked us in red on this image here. Wales is quite a small nation. We're a population of around about 3 million people against a UK population of 68 million. And as you can see from some of these images, for those who've never visited us, although we do have cities in the south of the country, for the most part, Wales is a very rural country known for our beautiful scenery, our long coastline, and our mountains. Wales has its own language, Cymraeg, and we also have a culture that spans back, as all parts of Europe, many centuries. We're known particularly, I think, for our castles. It is said that there are more castles per head of population in Wales than anywhere else in the rest of Europe. And I give you just a few lovely examples here to admire. We've also very well known across the world for our industrial heritage, for the role that Wales played, particularly in the Industrial Revolution. The United Kingdom joined the World Heritage Convention in 1984, 40 years ago this year. And in 1986, inscribed its first World Heritage Sites, which included one here in Wales, which was a serial nomination of the 4 castles of King Edward I. And we see 2 examples here. In the years since then, Wales has gained a further 3 World Heritage Sites, all of which demonstrate aspects of our industrial heritage. Ironworking, which is recognised by the Blaenavon industrial landscape, transport by the canal and aqueduct of Pont Casachta. I apologise for some of the place names which are in our native Welsh language, and most recently, quarrying in the slate landscape of northwest Wales. The management of our World Heritage Sites, while the UK is the state party, the actual presentation or the sort of physical management on the ground of World Heritage Sites in Wales falls to the individual nations. And that means that in Wales, the key body is the Welsh Government, of which Cadw, my organisation, is its Historic Environment Service. So we are responsible for ensuring that heritage assets of all types are protected, managed and maintained. We do this through implementing legislation, publishing guidance, and providing specific casework advice. Because, of course, the actual practice, as we all know, of managing assets on the ground is carried out by everybody from national bodies to local authorities to the thousands of individual owners who actually have responsibility for those assets. One aspect of Cadw, my organisation, is that in addition to acting as the legislative and regulator, we are also ourselves responsible for the management of 132 historic monuments in Wales, including all 4 of the castles and town walls that make up the World Heritage Site of Edward I in Gwynedd, which we see here. This serial property comprises the 4 castles, and in the case of 2 of them, also the town wall systems that surrounded these beautiful sites. And we also are responsible for managing the ironworks in Blaenavon, which today forms part of the museum at Blaenavon. The benefit of this for us is that in addition to producing the guidance and overseeing management of heritage assets more broadly across the country, of course, we also have to do it on the ground. So it gives us the opportunity to both practice and manage through guidance, which is extremely helpful because, of course, it does enable us to understand the consequences, if you like, of the guidance and work that we operate to see both sides. As others have said today, for us, managing our historic environment is essentially about managing change. Change, as has come across, is inevitable, and some of it can be beneficial, it can be neutral, or, of course, it can be detrimental in its effect. Some change is essential or necessary to allow a place or a building to continue in its original function or find a new beneficial use. And as we all know, assets left unmanaged will inevitably, through change, fall into ruin. So we, like other organisations across Europe, spend much of our individual officer time working with the owners of assets to encourage them to apply appropriate management using our conservation principles as our principal guiding practice. But today I'd like to focus on what we do in terms of managing our World Heritage Sites and how this links into our broader role of managing historic environment more generally. The Welsh Government's approach, like other countries, to managing World Heritage Sites is based on 3 principles. It's based on statutory protection or designation of individual assets, of the application and the necessary control systems that we use to manage the activities to those assets, a planning system to guide appropriate development affecting or which could affect assets and their settings, and the collaborative creation and implementation of the World Heritage Site management plans, which we see very much as an active process working with stakeholders. In terms of statutory designation, I think it's fair to say that over the decades, the United Kingdom has developed or had developed quite a complex system of laws protecting cultural heritage, with the first dating back as far as 1882. Wales, as part of the United Kingdom, shares many of its laws with the other parts of the UK, and in particular with England, with which we were joined in union back in the 16th century. But as of 1998 and the formation of the Welsh Senedd, the Welsh Government, Wales also now has its own powers to form its own laws. And since 2016, we have been working to draw together all of our protection laws for the historic environment into one single consolidated act, the Historic Environment Act for Wales, which you see here. And this week marks a very special week for us here in Wales because this act finally was enacted formally just this Monday. So I'm pleased to say that as of this Monday, Wales has new historic environment legislation, which for the first time is available to its population in both our languages, both English and Welsh, and is the start of what I hope to be a programme of simplification and clarification of legislation that works both within our sector and across all other sectors of government within Wales. This legislation sits at the top of a mechanism, if you like, a hierarchy of protection that we operate for the management of our historic environment. Our new Historic Environment Act is clearly one of our key areas, as is a planning act, which covers the way that heritage is managed in the planning system. But another act that is used in Wales, which is of interest, I think, is the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which reflects the conversations that have been taking place in this conference about the importance of sustainability. This act, which was formed in Wales in 2015, sets what is known as a well-being duty on all public bodies acting within Wales. As it says here, public bodies are required to operate in accordance with sustainable development principles in everything that they do, with that determined as being to act in a manner which seeks to ensure that the needs of the present are met without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. As I say, this Act applies to all public bodies within Wales from the government downwards, and as well as setting out this duty of well-being, set a series of goals, which you'll see in the coloured circle here, and of which one is specifically recognising the significance of culture and indeed Welsh language within Wales, and another one about the importance of being globally responsible and indeed connected. And this Act, I think, makes it slightly different, I think, from other parts of the UK in giving this recognition to the need to take sustainability into the heart of everything we do. And it also encourages bodies to work collaboratively through our 5 ways of working. And all acts and policies have to take account of the Wellbeing Act in their development. So this applies across the piece, including within the new Historic Environment Act, as I say. So just to give a sort of overview of how it operates in Wales. In Wales, as in the rest of the UK, we do not have a specific designation for World Heritage Sites under our Acts, but manage them through this process of designation of individual assets within the World Heritage Sites and recognising World Heritage Site as a material consideration within our planning. We have multiple forms of protection that we use across our World Heritage Sites, some of which date back quite a way, starting with, if I just move my slides on a tad, scheduling. All historic monuments of value of national significance are recognised as scheduled monuments, including many of the assets within our World Heritage Sites. And we have a consent regime to manage the change, the control works to them that operates through Cadw. All scheduled monuments are defined by areas, and here we see an example of one of our maps showing the scheduled areas that apply to part of the slate landscape of North West Wales World Heritage Site, specifically at the quarry of Dorothea. It also gives you a sense of the sort of landscapes that we're working with our World Heritage. As I say, we're primarily a very rural country, so we're looking at big sweeping landscapes and often big sweeping sites. The map here shows the scheduled areas, which are in red, and you'll also notice a number of blue dots, which relate to our historic buildings. Across Wales, we have some 30,000 historic buildings that are designated as for protection as listing, including the main important listed buildings, the main buildings within our World Heritage Sites, which I give some examples of here. And a third category of site that is picked up within our Historic Environment Act is a more recent one, really, of historic parks and gardens, which recognises, again, some of the themes that have come up today of the overlap between the importance of cultural and natural heritage. The mechanisms for protecting these assets from direct works are covered under the legislation. Particularly any works to those assets, with scheduled monuments being managed by Cadw, or the consent regime rather managed by Cadw, and works to listed buildings being managed at an individual local authority level. But another issue that has been looked at, particularly in this conference, is the question of development and how it may impact, not specifically always directly on an asset or on a World Heritage Site, but on potentially the World Heritage Site and its setting. And to manage this, we, like the rest of the UK, operate a planning system that is based primarily on the need to create initial plans. It is a plan-based planning system, mostly managed at local authority level, although larger infrastructure projects are determined at national level. In essence, all local authorities are required to create a local development plan that is based on the guidance that is provided by national policy and is used to guide decision making at an individual case level. Within that, local authorities are expected to preserve the outstanding universal value of World Heritage Sites by managing development within and adjacent to them, which is done by their policies in their plans, by the individual assessment of cases, and by consulting appropriate specialists. Within this system, we have embedded, and it's been embedded for quite a while, it must be said, historic impact assessments, which have been working thoroughly. I'm aware that I haven't got much time, so I'm going to move on to just one thing that I think might be of interest to people, which is the use we make of registered historic landscapes in Wales. As I noted, we're quite a rural country, and a lot of the development we have is looking at sites on a very large scale. 3 of our World Heritage Sites are really landscape properties. And a particularly useful tool we use is an evaluation system that is linked to our register of historic landscapes. This register was first introduced into Wales now some 25 years ago as a collaborative exercise between Cadw, the Historic Environment Service, our Natural Environment Service at the time, Countryside Council for Wales, and ICOMOS UK. It identified 58 landscapes, which we see here across Wales, as being the best examples of different types of historic landscapes. As you will expect, they incorporate World Heritage landscapes. So, for instance, down here, we have the Blaenavon World Heritage landscape, up here, Pont Casachta, and so forth. And these landscapes, within these landscapes, we have a mechanism of assessment. Oh, actually, I've jumped on one, which we call ACIDOL, or assessing the significance of the impact of development on historic landscapes, which has been operating now for quite a while. And it would be interesting to compare how some of this works against the new heritage impact assessment process, because we have a sort of longer basis, if you like, of assessment. Critical to this is the evaluation of the character of those landscapes, both at a large scale and at a lower, more individual scale. So, for instance, we see here one of the historic landscapes in North Wales in the round, as it were, the whole landscape, and here a breakdown of the different character areas that make up that landscape. This exercise of characterization has been carried out across all of our landscapes to provide a basis upon which organisations carrying out impact assessments and ACIDOL assessments can form their evaluation. Oops. And that brings me on really to a few points about perhaps the processes as they apply in practice, and reflecting perhaps on some of the things that have been said earlier today. Heritage impact assessment has been embedded in our processes for many years, and we therefore very much recognise many of the comments and thoughts that have been said by others today about how they work and how they don't work. One of the first things that obviously is so critical to all of these is the provision of good quality information. I've just shown you some of the information we have on historic landscape character areas. And I've got here a clip from one of our own websites, which shows the sort of historic environment data that we make available through our website. This is a requirement under our legislation that we make this information available to the public. And we have a historic environment record covering the whole of Wales that is actually a statutory requirement of Welsh ministers. Without good quality information and without access to information, assessment cannot take place. I think one of the 3 issues that I would reflect on in terms of how we manage change is, first of all, the question of balance. Getting the balance right for the level at which impacts are assessed is challenging. Developments need to be assessed on their own merit, since, as we all know, the scale, the location, the siting, the design can have dramatically different impacts. A small but badly designed development directly next to a World Heritage Site may be more impactful than a large development further removed. But against this process, we need to recognise that so often in our system, heritage impact assessments are being undertaken by people who are not the operators of the World Heritage Site, who are not the managers of the World Heritage Site, and how they can understand the values of OUV, and also coming down to what was said earlier, the different attributes, is a critical question that I think all of us have to answer. How do we make that information more available? And I think I put this in. We, like others, have found the heritage impact assessment, when appropriately applied, works brilliantly, but we do still encounter tendencies of developers and others trying to use them retrospectively to justify decisions that have already been made, rather than as they should be used to inform their development. And to some extent, this is perhaps down to still gaps in the skills of those carrying out the assessments, which of course in many cases is contractors who are being brought in to do assessments on behalf of developers. So for these reasons, having now completed our new legislation and brought it in, we are turning our attention to how we present our guidance. We've heard a lot today about the guidance provided by ICOMOS and others. And to some extent, I do worry that we are getting so much guidance that it can be very difficult to cut through to what is actually needed in any one individual case. We ourselves have vast quantities of guidance that we will be reviewing and updating in light of our new legislation. And I see this as an opportunity to try and respond to some of the comments that we get back on the ground from operators to say, we don't need more, we need it clearer and we need it simpler. We do like case studies, but we really need to understand, maybe through flowcharts and others, what is the level that is needed for different developments at different times, who should do it, and how can we make sure that it is used in a positive process that will actually inform effectively decision making. I thank you all very much for allowing me to participate today, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the talks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Wonderful insight into the practice in Wales. And yes, please stay online because we have an opportunity for questions at the end of the session. Von Wales gehen wir nach Schleswig-Holstein.
Now from Wales to Schleswig-Holstein, and we are talking about World Heritage as a part of monument protection in Schleswig-Holstein. So hello to Matthias Maluck, who is the head of room planning and also the responsible for World Heritage with the Archäological office in Schleswig-Holstein. He has managed several international projects in heritage protection, and he is also responsible for the site management of the World Heritage in Schleswig-Holstein. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today and to talk about monument protection, legislation, and World Heritage with the example that we have in Schleswig-Holstein. I think you are also going to see some laws, and I'm also going to tell you how we implement them and react to them, just as a little trigger. But before I'm going to get into that, I have prepared just a little overview, which is going to take up the points that we have already talked about today, which is why it doesn't make sense to even enter World Heritage in a context of monument protection. First of all, the idea is, how can I protect World Heritage sites? The convention has already been talked about today. It's the Convention for Protection of World Heritage Sites, and UNESCO itself, with its convention, is not able to protect these sites themselves. That is why they need local instruments, regional instruments, who implement these guidelines. And I think especially the Article 5 of the convention calls for these regional stakeholders. And in the case of Germany, we ratified the UNESCO World Heritage Convention in 1976. And back then, we thought that the existing legislation, and I think especially the Monument Protection Law, but also Natural Protection Act, were in place back then. So we are talking about more than just cultural heritage. But something that has always been difficult is that here in Germany, we have different federal states, and there's not a federal law on monument protection, but it is really up to the federal states. So this idea in 2007 has been extended by a different declaration from the cultural ministers, which then decided that the implementation of this convention should be entering into the law of the different federal states. So I think most of you should know this topic, that, for example, the Alp Valley in Dresden is no longer a World Heritage, because there has been a big discussion, also a legal discussion, about the construction of this bridge that you can see here. And we discussed very long, for a long time, if this was justified or not. Now Schleswig-Holstein has applied a new law on monument protection in 2015. The World Heritage was already in the law of 2012, but has now been specified even more in this new law. And what we have put into this law is based on best practices worldwide, which we have already heard about from ICOMOS, for example, today, but also based on the best practices that here in Germany. So for all of you who might not be familiar to Schleswig-Holstein, this is a map of a beautiful federal state. And here you can see it is the most northern federal state of Germany, neighboring Denmark directly. And we now have 3 different World Heritage sites. First one is a World Natural Heritage, which is the mud flat that we share with Denmark and the Netherlands, which has entered the list in 2009. And then the oldest World Heritage is the city of Lübeck since 78. And then the youngest World Heritage is the archaeological complex of Heiterbu and Dannewerk, which is an archaeological complex in the north of Schleswig-Holstein. So who is responsible for these sites? This is very complicated, in fact. On the one hand, we do have differences between natural sites and cultural sites. So on the one hand, for the mudflat is responsible the Federal Office for the protection of the coastline, national parks, and also for protection of the ocean. And then we have the cultural sites, where we as the Archaeological Office in Schleswig-Holstein are responsible directly. I'm going to talk about that in detail later. And then we also have another office which is responsible for monument protection, but they are not responsible if we are talking about cultural heritage of the city of Lübeck. Because in this case, there's another office that is responsible. So the federal state of Schleswig-Holstein has had World Heritage sites for a long time and has identified them as a part of their basic culture, which is why their protection is really important to us. And this is also entered our legislation. And this also means that the protection of those heritage sites is also entered into our legislation. So there are lots of different possibilities how to protect World Heritage sites. We have already heard about how we have many different legal possibilities as well. But for us as monument protection responsibles. This is usually the basis of our decisions. So in this case of Schleswig-Holstein, I want to point out 3 different points where World Heritage is entered in our legislation. First of all, that is the definition as World Heritage as protection areas, and then also the definition of responsible for World Heritage, for management plans, and also putting this into public interest. And then in the end, which is probably the most decisive point taken into implementation, who is responsible to verify these measures that are taken? So first of all, the protection of World Heritage sites. We have this paragraph who says that World Heritage sites are protected areas if they aren't already protected as cultural or natural heritage, which means that taking into practice, World Heritage sites are automatically defined as monumental protected areas. And the same goes for their buffer zones. But what does that actually mean? So theoretically, a World Heritage site, even if it wasn't entered into any kind of list of as a monument, as a protected monument, as soon as it is World Heritage, it will also enter those federal lists of monument protection. So as an example, I'm going to talk about Heiterburg-Dannenberg. So in red, you can see the cultural heritage site on the list. And then the blue part is the part that has also entered the protected area because of this status as World Heritage. So one part is protected as World Heritage, the other one as a monument. And there's one specialty, which is also special to Schleswig-Holstein, which defines that a monument is automatically a monument if it meets all the criteria as a historical, technical, cultural object and is therefore protected for the public. And as soon as we have recognized this value, the site is protected and as a monument. So this list of protected monuments is only an instrument to inform the public and any other stakeholders about the fact that a monument is protected. And I think this is the biggest strength, is that we don't have to enter the monuments into the list in order for them to be protected. So as a fun fact, because of this legal possibility, I do have the possibility to enter areas into the list that usually wouldn't be protected. So I can fill certain gaps between monuments. So I think we have already talked about cultural landscapes a lot today. And so I could basically enter a cultural landscape into the list of protected monuments before, even if there wasn't another criteria that has been met. And so since 2015, we do have the possibility that historic cultural landscapes can be entered into this list. And so far we haven't done that a lot, but I think it would be really interesting to see how this is implemented. So I think this paragraph really strengthens the administration that has been taking place so far anyway. So the next new implementation in our law is the the demand for having a World Heritage Management combined with a site management, and to create also management plans for the sites in question. So practically, this really doesn't play a huge role because with all the enlisted World Heritage sites, we already have had management plans taken into account with their nomination. But with site management, however, it is a bit difficult because if there is the demand for a management plan from the beginning on, that really does make a difference, because we have people present who can not only design this management plan, but also implement it in the end. And then another advantage of this paragraph is that the institution and the person of a World Heritage Management is also taking part in direct decisions. So we have the monument protection on one side, but also site managers on the other. And with the Archaeological Office in Schleswig-Holstein, it's all combined under one roof. And I think it's really interesting because this is all happening also in the administration of Lübeck, but there are people in different locations. And I think another important aspect is that there's also a call that the World Heritage sites, including the buffer zones, need to be protected if there are any public measures that are supposed to be taken. And this is something that we can come back to if there are new plans and measures that are taken into account. So if I'm talking about a legal context, then this means put into practice that if the protection of these heritage sites is balanced against other interests, then it really has a high value. So I do have the advantage that because of this law, there has to be a site management. Site managers are also included much more and can take part in any decisions that need to be made. And we also have the norm that World Heritage sites need to be protected. And this is really important for us from the monument protection, but also for anyone who is planning measures. We can find this balance, especially when it comes to planning, for example, of wind energy systems. So I brought one more example because in Schleswig-Holstein, we have a long-standing experience with the planning of wind energy. And after a initial complex time, we have certain areas where we can have wind energies and wind turbines put in, but they can only be put up in certain areas. It has now become a bit more difficult because of federal laws that allow to make exceptions. But basically, this topic is still relevant. We have 3% of federal state that are a prioritized area for wind energy. However, Lübeck and Heiterbund-Danneburg, the two World Heritage sites, are not included in this site, so it's not allowed to put in wind energy turbines here because of a risk impact assessment that we have done already. So you can see Lübeck on the right, and then on the left, you can see the mud flat of Heiterburg-Danneberg. And another example that I would like to introduce here is an HIA. that have been conducted because of a 380 kilovolt high voltage system to bring the wind energy that has been generated by the turbines, and that was supposed, or is supposed to go through the city of Lübeck. And this HIA was only conducted because there's this pressure to protect World Heritage sites. And in this case, there was only a moderate negative impact that has been found. So I'm going to conclude this with one last discussion, one last question that I want to talk about. So this is the approval of the Monument Protection Office, which gives us the biggest impact. So the law says that the Monument Protection Office, which is my office, has to approve all measures that are able to protect World Heritage sites. So in the next paragraph, it is defined that we are also able to decline these kind of measures if they seem to endanger World Heritage sites. And that means that as a consequence, we as the approving office and institution are the ones who decide if a status is endangered or not. Because if not, we weren't able to make this decision. So taking into practice, this is where the point where we ask for HIAs. And according to this law, we do also have the opportunity to postpone these measures. So as long as the HIA is not completed and we do not have all the information that we need, we are not going to make a decision. So the advantage is that the responsibility is with the highest institution for monument protection, and that the interests of World Heritage sites have a lot of weight opposed to other interests. And that we are the ones who, in first instance, at least, are the ones who decide if there's any endangerment of the World Heritage sites or not. And just one brief example in the end, you can see a crop expression that is located near a World Heritage site, and we as the approving office are the ones who are in charge here. We put this before court because we did not give the approval, and the court decided that we were right, and because even though we do need the resources that are being extracted here, the interest of protecting the World Heritage sites is more important, so says the court. So as a wrap up, I would like to say that the enlisting doesn't really change the practice, because we have always protected our World Heritage sites. We have always put functioning management structures in place, even without this new law. However, there is a really important impact towards politics and also towards the court and the whole legislation, and also for the planning of the federal state. For example, when it comes to large streets and infrastructure. where this is necessary. However, it is also always necessary that there is a political support of these decisions, because I think if not, a protection of heritage wouldn't be possible. Thank you.
Yes, paradise conditions in the north. Thank you so much. We are now going to look at the monitoring practices in the Czech Republic. So I would like to welcome Věra Kučová to the stage. She worked in the National Heritage Institute in Prague since 1984 and has been involved in mainly agenda concerning conservation areas and cultural landscapes. She is a member of ICOMOS and since 2007 a member of the Czech National Commission for UNESCO.
So, good afternoon, good late afternoon, dear all in the audience. I'm very glad to be here and thank you for invitation to this prestigious conference dealing with very, very important issues as impact assessment, monitoring, convention as such. So I have a few minutes to explain many things. So I hope that this presentation is too general and that you shall learn something as I have learned so far from you. So at the beginning, I say a few words about the system of our heritage protection and conservation. Probably some of you know neighbor Federal Germany, but to be sure how it works, we are just in the center of Europe, and we are not federal country, but we are organized according so-called regions. So we have capital city of Prague and 13 regions administered by regional offices, but the basic level of state administration for cultural heritage is provided by more than 200 municipalities with extended remit. It's the official name of them. So on contrary, National Heritage Institute I am a member of, it is one of the biggest state-funded organizations within the whole country, and we are advising all these executive bodies. We are organized also according to regions, so we have Directorate General, which is responsible for methodology, management, responsibility, things like this. Then we have 14 regional offices, which are seated mostly in regional towns or cities with important conservation areas. And above this, we have 4 regional historic sites management offices. All of them are also organized according to the whole regions. Under current legislation, our institute is responsible for many specialized tasks. They can be divided into 2 big groups. One is, as usual, Denkmalamt, providing expertise, official opinion for executive bodies and owners, protected buildings and sites. We provide some educational activities, research survey, but the regional heritage site managements are mainly responsible for direct conservation of numerous cultural properties open to the public. As regards World Heritage properties, we are very proud to have nowadays already 17 places on World Heritage list. And only a few years ago, as you can see from the dates, we started to cooperate more internationally. So our World Heritage sites are also transnational. It is nice to say that all of them are shared our German neighbors. One is Erzgebirge mountain region together with Saxony. One is a part of great spa towns of Europe. We have already listened to an example from Baden-Baden. And the third one is our only national World Heritage Site, which is about these beech forests shared with other 17 countries. So here is a map of Czechia. You can see that World Heritage Sites are not spread systematically on the territory. They are part of each region, which is sometimes some problem when we are trying to find or define national priorities. But of course, it doesn't matter because World Heritage doesn't exist according to administrative division of globe. So how do we cope with responsibilities of monitoring World Heritage Sites? If we go back a bit to the history of convention and its operational guidelines, it is good to remind ourselves the year 1999, when these guidelines were amended, just in the articles concerning monitoring. It was clearly stated there that it is necessary that every year the conditions of the property be recorded either by the manager or the agency with management authorities. In Czechia, it was just after we acquired the 9th property. It was necessary to go with this as well, but it was also an era of very rapid inscriptions. So by the time we still didn't have enough experience, the status of site managers. So our Ministry of Culture decided that the National Heritage Institute shall be the body responsible for the yearly monitoring. If we look now at the current version of operational guidelines, we see numerous articles that are connected and related to monitoring. There are so many other responsibilities for other bodies, professional site managers, self-governance, and so on, mainly conservation, communication, education, and so on. So as a result of rising number also of our World Heritage properties, and what should be underlined, most of our World Heritage sites are either urban ensembles or cultural landscapes. So most of our World Heritage sites are really huge with hundreds of owners. So we were into monitoring exercise, having enough time. So our ministry decided to continue with reporting. So what National Heritage Institute does as regards World Heritage? It is not only monitoring, of course. We are involved in new nominations. We do expert advising how to prepare management plan. We are involved in the whole process of preparing management plan, cooperating with national ICOMOS, also the Czech National Committee. We participated in studying through this. But what might be interesting for you, from these 17 heritage sites, 7 properties that are managed by our institute are also part by the World Heritage treasures. So in the yellow table, you can see that some of them are only minor part. For example, in Prague, we have only gardens below Prague Castle. In case of Žatec and the landscape of Záhřeb, there is one castle. But in several cases, as Český Krumlov, Telč, Lednice, Valtice, Karčevice, we are managing ourselves the iconic things which present the main OUV attributes, if we keep the terminology. So if you are interested to go in more detail, you can check our website, because World Heritage in Czechia is considered a prestigious designation in Czechia. So even our websites have specific part just to World Heritage spaces. We have also basic information in English, but which is most important, World Heritage sites are presented in OUV in Czech language. There is a right connection to World Heritage web page. There is photo gallery. You can go just into our register of protected heritage assets. You can go to additional resources, and in case of this cast, you also can enter their devoted pages for visitors. National Heritage Institute has developed really a large integrated information system. We also work with Geoportal, which have 5 main spheres. It is catalog of protected sites, it is library, documentation, other digital documentation, and we also have all protected assets in our Geoportal, which shall be used also for attributes mapping in near future, of course. Now, closer to the monitoring practice. As I have already mentioned, we changed national practice to biennial system. It was just in the 2022-23 period when we piloted the modified structure. On our page, you can also see our methodological toolkit for our colleagues in regions who are responsible for monitoring. And we also developed templates to be easier to insert all information there. This toolkit can be downloaded, as well as textbook where all our heritage sites are presented, also with maps and OUV definition. This textbook is double language, so as to teach our audience in English connected with this heritage. This toolkit also informs generally what is periodic reporting, what is national monitoring, and the second part is devoted to the methodology, how to prepare national reports. We are preparing 2 kinds of reports to be inspired by periodic reporting. So we have one summary report overarching the topic nationwide, and reports concerning individual properties. The basis is that they are similar, they have formalized appearance, of course, and as regards individual monitoring of particular individual property, its structure is very simple, ABCDE. Some data are stable, which regards by part A, which are stable data. We decided to repeat them because our partners, site managers, but also self-government bodies and members of steering groups are changing. So we are repeating some stable data. The core of the report is represented by information RC and annexes. I will not read all these chapters, but probably you can read it quickly. It is also based on experience with periodic reporting, because our national monitoring is collecting data for this periodic reporting, not to do this twice in different manner. The main summarizing part, called B, is to be filled just in the end, because its aim is to summarize the main findings, main factors changing during the monitored period of 2 years. And which is important, the author of the report should also give some recommendations, what to improve, or how to implement management plan quickly or better. So it is really important that it is not collected data, but also define some ideas. The reason is why this part B precedes the B part, that is summarizing in the common structure main findings for our Ministry of Culture, who is the main receiver of this report. The summary report, in line with its name, tries to combine general findings and brings main recommendations from individual reports, and it is very complex and condensed materials. Its structure is also simple. You can see that there are general information, 5 minutes, okay. There is an obligatory part, which also gives overview of a situation of steering groups, management plan, what should be updated, and so on. And which may be interesting for you, it's part who is involved in preparing these reports and who is the manager and receiver. We decided together with site managers that some parts are prepared together with them. So we try to involve site managers as much as possible, especially in the last few years. And I would like to show you main findings, which are a bit similar to periodic reporting factors. So the main findings from the last 2 years are buildings and development, transportation, infrastructure, of course, tourism, which is now going to the numbers prior COVID-19. But we also have difficulties with monitoring the number of visitors with open spaces and so on. Climate change is a big challenge in our country. It is sad to say that Czech Republic belongs among countries with the fastest increase of temperature in Europe and in the world, because we do not have enough water. But we also are trying to find positive information, best practices, funding possibilities. So I should be a bit quicker. If I were to briefly compare periodic reporting and national monitoring, the principles are as follows. In periodic reporting questionnaires, multiple choice questions predominate, which is easier for statistics and global statistics, and it was voluntary to contribute with additional opinion on topics. On contrast, our national reports require preparation of information in a bound text, and it forces the author to formulate their opinion, especially in the summary section, and to be able to compare these monitored periods together. Our work is organized by regions, and as individual monitoring is also carried by colleagues from regional offices, we try to make some capacity building, not only educate people outside our institute, but as all of you know, it is important to gather together. So our meetings are twice a year. We combine meetings with site managers. And we are very lucky that in Kutná Hora, there is very important center for UNESCO designated sites. So Kutná Hora tries to educate the youth and young children, and we also work with them very often, and they provide the background for our things. So in conclusions, I would like to confirm that our monitoring and experience of a relatively stable team of our staff will participate also in creating the national action plan, which was mentioned in the beginning of this conference this morning. And just a month ago, we had a meeting to discuss the broad spectrum of this menu in regional action plan. And we hope that in the next summary report, 2024-25, we shall have our action plan finalized. So thank you very much, Jan.
Ganz herzlichen Dank für den.
Thank you very much for this great introduction to this monitoring system. So now we are going a little bit south and we are going to talk about preventive monitoring in Austria. And I'm looking forward to the presentation of Ulrike Herbig, who has studied geodesy in Vienna. In her dissertation, she has been researching the interdisciplinary documentation of built heritage. Today, she is a senior scientist at the Faculty of Architecture and Room Planning at the Technical University in Vienna. She's also a research assistant and a referent for international affairs. She is still working on interdisciplinary approaches and participative measures. And she is also the lead of the Preventive Monitoring Group of ICOMOS, Austria. Thank you very much. I am looking forward to talking about preventative monitoring in Austria. I am going to talk to you about why we are doing this, what's the idea behind it, and what our framework looks like. So the idea is based or is developed on the basis that when we started developing it, and now we have 1,223 properties worldwide that have outstanding universal value that makes them important for humanity. This has been decided by the 221 people in the World Heritage Committee and also the different advisory boards. And since those people aren't really capable of managing all of these different sites, as you can probably imagine, because all of the activities that should be done by the state parties aren't always fulfilled by them. So in Austria, we only have 12 World Heritage sites, but we are a small country. So this is more than sufficient for us. So to describe this to you just very briefly and what kind of tasks are connected to them, we have 3 different cultural landscapes. We have 3 historic centers, and one of them is a urban area, which is transnational. And then we also have the Semmeringbahn, which is an industrial site, but also a cultural landscape. Then we have the Castle of Schönbrunn in Vienna, and also transnational sites. One of them is a natural site with the forests, which are really in our responsibility as ICOMOS. Also the prehistoric sites in the Alps, which I think are really well taken care of by our site managers. And they are one of the most famous sites in Austria. And then also the borders of the Roman Empire. Yeah, just to give you an overview of what we're dealing with in Austria. So in the framework of the National Committee around 2007, we realized that the site managers have a lot of expertise with the things happening on site, though they really are experts, supported oftentimes by other stakeholders. However, those site managers mostly do not have the capacities to really think about the framework that are important for the operational guidelines for the World Heritage, and that are also decided in the scientific bodies of the advisory boards. And so the idea was that in the name of the National Committee, one person should be designated who is also well known in the region and who knows the region themselves, who can support these site managers. And so 2008, in the General Assembly of ICOMOS in Quebec, there has been a discussion about this as well, and it was decided that preventive monitoring should be conducted. So it's actually called preventive activities and monitoring, supported by and so on and so forth. But then we shortened that a little bit to preventative monitoring, because this makes the most sense, or well, as you want to call it, because it's hard to monitor something that hasn't yet happened, but you know what we are talking about though. And in 2010, the monitoring group in Germany was founded, and I think we're going to hear about that a little bit later by Mr. Hesse. And then time and time again in the framework of General Assemblies by ICOMOS, there have been discussions about how this preventative monitoring should take place, what it should look like. And then in 2019, I had the honor of presiding an international discussion where participants from all continents came together to discuss over the manual that we were writing. And the ministry, which is competent for all these heritage sites in Austria, was taking part as well. So this really was an exceptional opportunity for all of us, and enabled us to do many things that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And so we didn't have to pay for anything, which really is, a great exception. And especially the colleagues from Africa said that they just wouldn't be able to afford a lot of the measures that we were taking, and that they also couldn't be traveling to all of the World Heritage sites because of the conditions on site. So what could this look like on an international level to have the means of comparison, more or less, and to also implement this in the operational guidelines? So between 2017 until today, there was a working group discussing these issues. So although they haven't been really active, we can already see that there are different levels from the participants on international levels down to the people that are locals and are acting on site. And so we are still working to towards this direction. So the basics of preventive monitoring in Austria. One basis is that we are only advising. We can't make any decisions. That can only do the World Heritage Committee. And anyone else is just advising, really. Also, the experts from ICOMOS on an international level, they do not make any decisions. I think we've heard that earlier today as well. We are only giving advice to the World Heritage Committee, and then they will decide in the end. And then it's also possible that the information on a scientific level from international experts are seen differently than from local experts. So if you give advice on a local level, then that might change internationally. So we are looking at two different levels. One of this is a solution-based advising. And then the other one is that we are working on the basis of international information. And that this information is never decisive, but really just to inform. And then what we are doing in this context is also that we support with master plans, with management plans, if they are being asked for, just to bring the viewing point of World Heritage into the discussion. So we are also often in different work with different stakeholders. We never have the right to vote, but we are advising many different institutions. And we also support and advise when it comes to giving awareness to World Heritage sites. So we have a lot of demand on that as well. When it comes to education, reaching out to schools, educational training, all of that is also an area where we can advise and on which possibilities we have with World Heritage. And since many members of the National Committee in Austria are working with universities, that whenever there is a project in question, that we could hand that down to students who then would do scientific research on that. And then based on this, the committee could make their advice. So the work of the students really could be the basis for the discussion why something is suitable for World Heritage or not. So whenever we have topics arising, we also consult with the mayors and then talk to them and discuss with them World Heritage. So who am I talking about when I say we? So we are a monitoring group who, in the framework of the National Committee, we are a group that is split into several teams. One team is always made of 2 people who are independent, usually don't work or live near or in the site. For example, in Graz, we didn't manage to achieve that. But still, we have talked to the site managers if they see this as independent enough to be advised by these people. And overall, this really works well. We have a very detailed system. This actually does not look like it on my slide. So I think you have to shift that in your head. It still looks little bit like a refinery. But you are not supposed to study that, but it's just trying to visualize how we are working and what we can do if we work on topics where we just can't find a positive solution, that we have more and more entities that we can consult up onto the World Heritage Center if things aren't going the way that we would hope them to. And then I do have a few examples on how we deal with World Heritage. So this is a World Heritage site that I am monitoring since 2012. It's the Neusiedler Lake, which has an OUV because for thousands of years, you can see the cultural development in this area. And so far, it can really be seen in the landscape around the lake how these things have developed, and a lot of these landscape elements are still present, more or less, I say. Obviously, it could be better. Unfortunately, it is not, but we are doing our best to protect this site. For example, with the 2008 Council for building in World Heritage. We've been trying to put this in this context, also how does the field look with nominations, which kind of descriptions are important with the OUV, and what kind of framework do we need for planning and building in the area of World Heritage. Then we also have a project that we have planned in Donnerskirchen. Here has been planned a fire station, which goes against the OUV because if you look at the rural area here, the fire station wouldn't really fit in and would endanger the OUV. But it is one part that makes up the OUV is this structure of this village. And so here we have worked with students from a university to make up different possibilities of what this fire station could look like on different locations. And then there were firemen, hundreds of firemen in their uniforms discussing what this really is about. And this really brought us forward on different levels because everyone just knew what to look out for in the future. And then there's one more beautiful example where you can see that the awareness for World Heritage isn't always there, because this is one of the most significant views of a World Heritage site, where you are greeted by this huge cat. And this is where we are working with our colleagues from Natural Protection, where they said we can't really do anything against this cat. We don't have any legal basis for that. But the people that that were putting up this cat forgot that they needed the approval. So the cat will be removed, which is very nice. And then other challenges are, for example, buildings near the lake, where you can see that buildings are being constructed, even though there is no legal basis for that. And once they are decided and implemented, there really isn't much that we can do. So, for example, here we can see a site which is going to be a bathing site. We are also working with scientists who are working with visualization and with the impact of wind energy systems, trying to fit them visually into landscapes and also assessing their visual impact. Another challenge is also fighting with the mayors sometimes. For example, here we can see a supermarket, which doesn't really fit into into the World Heritage sites, as well as the gas station right next to it. So some people just don't seem to get the point, but we are really trying to raise awareness so that maybe even in a few decades, we can still see why these cultural sites and areas are on the list of the sites with OUV. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We are now returning back home to Germany and are looking at the preventative monitoring in Germany. And I welcome Mr. Hesse. He is a studied architect and urban developer, as well as monument conservator, and has worked in Bremen, has then changed to Hamburg, where he worked at the Historic Preservation Office, and then went on to work in Berlin for the State Historic Preservation Office there. Then he returned to Hamburg as the head of the Historic Preservation Office there. And since 2018, he is a member of the monitoring group and its speaker. Hello, good evening, or well, afternoon. I really do hope I stick to the schedule. Ulrike was very brief. So I do have to elaborate for a bit, but I try to keep it short. So since the ratification of 1976, it was very successful. Okay, so this works perfect. We have 54 World Heritage sites, and we are trying our best to preserve and protect these sites, especially for those and sticking to the criterias which are defined through the outstanding universal value. So we've already heard a lot about periodic reporting and reactive monitoring, but the preventative monitoring is not yet included in the guidelines, as already mentioned by my colleague. So last year, all of the German World Heritage sites have received preventative monitoring. And because of section 29 of the World Heritage Convention, we did the reactive monitoring and the periodic reporting. So here we have the OUV criteria included and to be named. So ICOMOS is not part of these processes. I just have to check that we are at the correct slide. Now we're correct. The state parties of the convention have agreed to reactive monitoring, as mentioned in the convention. Now we have to prove that all of the measurements are being taken for preservation and conservation of World Heritage sites, especially for those such as us, as ICOMOS, ICROM, IUCN. We have the function and are also obligated to act according to the sections of the World Heritage Convention. So we make a technical review that we hand in with the World Heritage Committee. It shows for the respective sites what needs to be done and our solutions for that. Especially since so many of the sites have been listed as endangered, we are glad that a lot of communities have come together to work on this and finding solutions here. Now, we have waited for a very long time to have managed to get to this status. So we are in dire need to fasten the processes between the state parties and the communication between the state parties and the World Heritage Committee and the respective communities. Now, right now, we think that there will not be any betterings with that monitoring. So we think that preventive monitoring is the tool for the future. So it's basically worked up from the German National Committee, especially in initiative of Michael Patzet, the president of ICOMOS Germany and ICOMOS International. And he was the one who developed the concept of preventative monitoring, especially in regards to quality management. There he is. So conflict management, a big point of his thoughts, and his reasoning was, and I quote, the specific tasks of ICOMOS in the correlation with the convention mean that the tools we have for the sites that are nominated to be inscribed into the list of World Heritage have to be assessed. And then the precondition has to be watched and preserved. The state parties have entered their respective reports for that. Quote end. So we've already seen a lot of mentioning of the UNESCO, a lot of reports from them, a lot of information. So I have to correct Ulrike there. ICOMOS Germany has been around since 2001, not 2010. Currently we have 73 members. We have currently 49 World Heritage sites, and 2 more are currently nominated. Our members are interdisciplinary. We have cultural sciences, archaeology, architecture, landscaping, historic preservation, urban development, and so on. In 2019, we set up new regulations for us, and a few are mentioned here. So the members will be named by the heads of the group. They are appointed for they are elected for 3 years. At least 2 of those are working together in a 4i principle for 3 years. And if need be, those 3 years can be extended. Now, further members can be asked to join if need be. There are further regulations in respect to prior work of ICOMOS members, especially since a lot of people have already worked or dealt with one of the heritage sites. So, however, we have to say that none of that has been an obstacle so far. So they are in this close communication with the regional authorities and the site managers, so that we know the changes that need to be made. The monitoring responsibles, they work towards keeping the integrity of the World Heritage sites. And what is very important for us is that we work preventative, so ahead of time and very, very early, from very early on. We are working in close relation with monument protection and care, for example, as well as the communities. We have an advantage in relation to the other authorities, since we are only acting according to the OUVs or the monument protection procedures. So we are working with we have an annual report that we send out to all of the members and participants. And in order to avoid any conflicts, we try to have a discussion in this matter, the speaker or the president is directly writing to the responsibles, so monument authorities and so on. If there is a case where conflict cannot be resolved, the head of ICOMOS Germany is receiving notice of that from the president of ICOMOS Germany and will then forward that to the UNESCO World Heritage Center.
So here you can see the structure of ICOMOS Germany and how everything is correlated between the different institutions around the World Heritage Site. Those yellow flashes are potential conflicts that can arise. The advisory of monitoring is usually based on the OUV and not necessarily on conservating details. What is important for our advice is the attributes and the projects that are important for the OUV, which doesn't mean that we don't care about monument protection. We think that it's important to talk about the colleagues of monument protection, which is always put into place. Not only because we have a contract about that. We also have information, which it is. So our speakers are always taking part into the federal monument protection meetings that are taking place, for example, here in Goslar. And also this goes the other way around, so that the speakers of the monument protection are taking place in our yearly conferences as well. This is important for the exchange of expertise and to prevent conflicts. This year we have been in the Erzgebirge, Kroschenori, where we have seen a lot of the World Heritage Site there. The next journey will go to Heiterbu-Dannewerk, which we have already heard about today, which is a huge site in Schleswig-Holstein. And also the German UNESCO Commission has a cooperation with us, which is more general. So this is not just based on monitoring, but also on just supporting each other, especially in questions concerning World Heritage. Or for example, like the conference that we had yesterday, which was organized by 3 different partners about water management. So much about the structure of the monitoring group. Now I would like to introduce a few areas of conflicts that we have had in the past. So here we're going to Potsdam. This plan took place a few years ago at the Havel, next to the Park of Babelsberg. And living near the waterside is something that lots of people would like. And this is why the city of Potsdam has sold many properties on the waterside to investors. And one of the last sites that was still left should now become a construction site. You can now see the proposition that we had made, and then next to that, the plan that was the original one. This is why ICOMOS and the Monument Protection Office have been in conflict with the government. In 1840, when the king was in power, he wanted to have this as a park and a green area that he wanted to have a lot of visibility points so that you could see far into the area and really have a landscaping region, which was really thoughtful. This is really important for the area of Potsdam and is an attribute that has to be preserved, no matter what. The most important viewing points of the Park Babelsberg are the 1853 constructed tower on the Hünenberg, which you can't see on the pictures right here, but it's really important for the view, as other heights with viewing points. So you could see into the city of Potsdam, for example, into the city of Teltow, on the river Havel, and on the city of Potsdam with its different churches and towers. On the right, you can see the tower of the senior residence here in Potsdam, which was built instead of a church that had been destroyed. You can see this red dot. This is where the tower is. So in the end of the 19th century, it was started to construct new buildings that then were blocking this view with lots of high buildings. There was only one gap that was left, which was called the Potsdam window. And now this one should become a construction site as well, and therefore destroy the OUV significantly. So in red, you can see the construction site that was planned, and then the corrected version where it still is decided on an area that should be remaining a park. So after cooperating with the Monument Protection Office, we then made a statement to ICOMOS Paris regarding the Article 172 of the operational guidelines. And then the Potsdam window could actually be preserved at least a little bit. So this was a compromise, which was still really hard fuzz, but still it was a compromise, which was also considering all the developments that have been taking. Surely the concepts of monitoring that we have seen in the last few examples are different in practice, but you can see that the preventive monitoring does make sense to prevent the heritage sites to be in danger. And since the assembly in Quebec 2008, which has already been mentioned, there is a control instrument which has not entered the operational guidelines yet. So a while ago, there is a working group of ICOMOS who is working on these topics, but I feel like they haven't made real progress so far. Dangers to World Heritage sites are very diverse. And so once more, I would like to cite Michael Pitzelt from 2006. And this is why, in this case of problems, we need a continuous preventive monitoring, which is more than just seeing the monument protection. Concerning World Heritage sites, this task can only be done by ICOMOS as an advisory body, as well as its 9,000 members worldwide and other national and international committees. We can only hope that all national committees of ICOMOS will be supported by international committees and are going to work on this preventive monitoring in the future, because in the end, it's the national committees who are working towards preserving the national heritage sites in their country, and those will be the ones who can report. The reports of the National Committee will be given to the International Secretary of ICOMOS in Paris so that they can decide in which way they are going to report to the World Heritage Committee. And then what has been described as directive monitoring might be the result of that. So for more experience, if we consult the national committees soon enough, then we can minimize risks and dangers by just reporting and advising early enough. these hopes of the former president still aren't taking place today, haven't been put into action. But we are still trying to transport these ideas towards UNESCO. And then we could hope that maybe this would enter into the operational guidelines as well. So the national committees that are present here have entered their experience in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So now we have 5 p.m. Maybe we have 1 or 2 questions for this session, and then do this collectively with the wrap-up session for the whole day. Probably all of you ask what happened to the cat with Ulrike Herbig, but maybe we do not have to discuss that. I would like to ask whether there are questions here in the room. So then I would like to ask a question to Matthias. I was very surprised to hear of the situation in Schleswig-Holstein. All of that sounded very paradise-like. So where's the problem? Or are you completely happy with this situation? Obviously not, but not in correlation to our World Heritage Site. We don't have that many, but we also are facing the issue of wind turbines and wind energy. We do have a lot of those, so that's probably the difference between the World Heritage Sites and the monuments that we have. So those are the big topics that we're dealing with right now. In relation to the World Heritage Sites, though, that looks very good right now. But well, only future will tell what is going to happen with further political decisions. We have discussed the topics of landscape shaping and change during recent decades. And obviously, because we have a very flat land, you see a wind turbine from 100 miles away, basically. So I would like to add that wind turbines are the visual impact of wind turbines aren't not really taken into consideration. You can see them from 1 to 3 to 5 kilometers away. And especially with the systems and sites, we know that they are not in the direct corridor of those wind turbines. But obviously there's problems in case any projects are planned where turbines would be in a direct corridor of sight to the monuments or heritage sites. So I guess the situation in regards to development pressure is a bit different for us, and not as acute. So one question to Mr. Roberts. So you, during the day, many times wind energy was mentioned. So maybe the question in regards to World Heritage Sites and sustainability, maybe Hamburg is an example for sustainable energies. You mentioned in regards to Wales that there's a well-being duty for future generations. So my question would be, in what way sustainable energies might be a problem in Wales or in Great Britain generally, and or if the topic is a bit more laid back over there. So if or if that is something that is taken into consideration with the well-being duty.
Hello. Yes, sustainability and in particular adapting to climate change, I hope people can hear me, is an increasing concern across obviously the UK and Wales. We already have quite a lot of onshore wind farms, primarily in the middle of the country, in the sort of central belt. But increasingly, there is a desire to increase the amount of wind energy in Wales, and we are starting to see proposals emerging for wind farms, particularly in the south of the country, close to Blaenavon, but they have yet to work their way through our planning process. One of them is already alerted to the World Heritage, to ICOMOS, to the UNESCO Centre in Paris, and we will be pursuing that one closely in terms of the impact assessment process, but it is yet to sort of formally come forward. But alongside that, I would say that we have got a really useful exercise that is being carried out in Wales, which we have a sector, historic environment sector, climate adaptation plan, which is being developed, because we recognize that there's two aspects to climate change. There is the work that often gets a lot of the publicity, which is trying to tackle climate change with the new energies, approaches to renewables, but also there is alongside that the need to adapt to climate change, because we recognize that in many cases this change, as we see in the news every day, is already with us. We are seeing flooding, we are seeing problems that are affecting our assets, and the production of the climate change adaptation plan has been a very good exercise in Wales, because it has brought together all the interested parties to recognise the concerns and to start to try to work together to find appropriate solutions.
Thank you very much. Wenn es keine Fragen gibt gibt's.
Thank you very much. Are there any last questions for this last part? So then I would open up. Maybe there's some questions from the chat.
It's an English question. Do you think the management system for World Heritage needs to incorporate with politics? Cooperate. I'm not sure. Spelling is not quite clear. By somebody anonymous.
Ist aber niemand gerichtet?
Nee.
Ja. Also wenn sich jetzt jemand angesprochen oder berufen fühlt, das zu beantworten, lassen wir es vielleicht im Raum stehen.
So maybe we can have a short wrap up of what we discussed today. Many different topics. We had a very clear start with the highest level of UNESCO and all of the organizations. For me personally, the procedures were quite clear. The guidance and where we can find it. Then we had the different heritage impact assessments, procedures being discussed. And then we ended with the monitoring, and we could see just how complex the whole processes get the more practical you get. So the picture gets more complex. So I would like to somehow get a wrap up on that, on how to create one big picture with everything wrapped under one roof. Maybe the last section, I don't know if Florian Markson is still here. I would like to get back to the preventative monitoring with Czechia, Austria, and Germany, and also the correlation to Vienna. So in what way was the preventative monitoring part of the whole solution for Vienna? Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So there's so much ICOMOS personnel here. Maybe I won't be popular after what I'm about to say, but basically what I want to say, first of all, I really like preventative monitoring. I always advertise it very much. I think it's a very good system. So first of all, but internally, we have to see a few difficulties that it brings. So we have the international documents and that's the difficulty to get from the national to the international level. The implementation, especially with capacity building and so on, is very difficult. From the time on when you have preventative monitoring or a team for preventative monitoring, there might be it might look like there is too much involvement. So what you hear a lot is that the bilateral talks and discussions, especially with the monitoring, often lead to wrong findings. So obviously what I think is that that is not correct, but it's a very it's a misconception that happens very often. So for Vienna, it's a quite difficult question to answer. Obviously, there were some correlations where one might be able to ask if it was the correct way to work with that partner, but in general, the city finished with the reactive monitoring and very quickly. So the international level and the mechanisms of the international guidelines. So especially with the danger list being a hot topic, I do think that Vienna has less to-dos. So it's very difficult to see here how the professional expertise and the monitoring can be put under one roof here. I think Ulrike Herbig also she was faster. So obviously I do not want to oppose Mr. Meixner, but and I want to say that in the past processes have happened that weren't as goal-oriented. However, during the last missions of ICOMOS International in Austria, well, we had quite a few. It was emphasized that this cooperation was very helpful. So what I received was that many times opinions were given that actually helped with the cooperation between the communities, the authorities, and the individual sites. So in the end, it wasn't as bad as everybody thought it would be. We obviously have to talk to the site managers of the respective World Heritage sites much more, so that they realize that it is about them as well, that it is their obligation and their tasks to take the World Heritage into consideration. We were able to work very well with the local focal point, and we hope to further enhance with this topic being put in the limelight. Any other questions? Maybe inspirations, or so not only to the monitoring but for the whole day.
floor, but an old man, an old conservator, I have to tell you, confess, I learned a lot during this day, but I had the feeling that we are among ourselves, professionals. And the issue is that when we are dealing with monuments and sites, old-fashioned expression, heritage, built heritage, we have to understand nothing of them was built being monuments. They became during time. So I want to underline the importance of time and the understanding of values. The challenge with us, with the conservationists, is we are looking back 100 years and forward 100 years, and not 4 years on a cycle of elections. This is my answer on the chat question, that the challenge is that there are some important expressions like respect of existing values, like refrain the get profit as much as possible, and respect not only for heritage but for each other. So I do believe that we could develop the best of the best systems for monitoring and reactive something, on preventive something. The issue is that if we are alone as conservationists, is a very nice vocation for us, but we never won. So my message is, having 14 grandchildren, that if you really want to forward the heritage to the next generation, not enough dealing with heritage. We have to deal with people, with youngsters, with children, and monitoring may be a fantastic thing. And I have seen that in many cases, locals, people are involved, but in this globalizing world, the challenge is that the local communities are very, how to say, different and not homogeneous. So the challenge is dealing more and more with people, and of course, not forget monuments. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Das ist eigentlich ein wunderbares Schlusswort.
Thank you. That was a very good word at the end, but we still have some time. So there's still a chance to say to that. Maybe, Frederick, you still have a couple of words for us. So if there's no further need, then I won't keep you any longer. I thank you very much for being here in person and online. It was a very informative day, and I really hope we can continue the discussions at a later point in time. So I am very thankful towards all of the people that made this day possible, from financing this, the technicians, the organization. I wish you lots of fun on the remaining days of the fair, and remind you to attend the member meeting tomorrow. Thank you very much.